So a while back I made a video on why I thought Minato was overrated, and in that video I hinted at a lot of hypothetical battles, including Minato versus Pain. So today is finally the day that I gave you guys my actual thoughts on who would actually win, especially considering that there are some people out there who, honestly, I think their opinions on Minato versus Pain are kind of outlandish. First off, I want to say that I have not read the Minato manga yet, so I can't include any of his feats from there into here because, well, I'm not aware of any of these feats, but I will be doing a reaction to the manga, and need be, I will make another video that revises the potential future mistakes in this one due to the manga. But yeah, please consider subscribing and let's get into it. So let's quickly go over some of the interpretations of how strong each character is. As for Pain, honestly, he's quite straightforward. Sanin and Kage level ninja are honestly quite fodder in comparison to him. Jiraiya, while in Sage mode, just flat out admits that 3 Pains are stronger than him. The same is apparent with Orochimaru, who kills Hiruzen, who was stronger than the Gokage, and that same Orochimaru gets bodied in 3 seconds just by the Diva Path alone. Sage Mode Naruto is another Sanin / Kage level fighter who loses to handicapped Pain, and yes, he did lose. Now I don't want to go over how unfair Naruto versus Pain actually was, but I will talk about it throughout this video. But I do think one of the most blatant displays of how nerfed Pain was versus Sage Mode Naruto was how, I think it was the Soul Steel Path, he blocks a punch from Sage Mode Jiraiya. The same Sage Mode Jiraiya who can like pick up rhinos. He blocks a punch from Sage Mode Jiraiya. And then versus Naruto, the Diva Path, a stronger path of Pain, gets kicked by Sage Mode Naruto and goes flying across the entire battlefield. So there's clearly something going on here with Pain's power. And how this makes sense, right? Because, I mean, Pain fought the entire village before fighting Naruto, and there were also a bunch of other factors. As for Pain's ceiling, he should be relative to KCM1 Naruto. We know this because Minato thought that Naruto would need the 9 tails to be Obito, and of course Pain is stronger than Orange Mask Obito, or at the very least, relative to him. Another thing that sort of cements the idea that a fully powered Pain should be relative to KCM1 Naruto is the fact that Pain should also be relative to Itachi, and honestly probably stronger. And Itachi is a character who in Edo literally fights KCM1 Naruto. And yes, I do not think that Edo Itachi is way stronger than alive Itachi. I do think he's way stronger than his near-death, ultra-sick version of himself, but Itachi at his healthiest, I do not think that Edo Itachi is significantly stronger than him. Now, I don't think that Pain would beat KCM1 Naruto, but I do think it would be a good fight, and low-key, Shibaku Tensei might just win Pain the fight. As for Minato, it is much less straightforward, because he's honestly pretty featless. But there are 3 main interpretations that we can go with, and they all have some evidence, right? But some interpretations are more valid than others in my opinion. So the first interpretation, and this is going to be pretty unpopular, but this is just one interpretation. The first interpretation is that Minato is Sanin / Kage level. Obviously stronger than most Kage and the Sanin, but still relative to them or in that tier. Like I said earlier, this is a very unpopular opinion, but there is a decent amount of evidence that supports this. For one, people do like to ignore this one, but Minato fights the Raikage and was somewhat of a rival to him. Yes, the Raikage admits that Minato is faster than him and obviously stronger than him, but he still fights him dozens of times and survives. I mean, this is a stark contrast between characters like Pain or Itachi, where like Jiraiya cannot fight Pain dozens of times and survive. Orochimaru cannot fight Itachi dozens of times and survive. If Pain was in Minato's position, the Raikage would have died pretty quickly and just wouldn't even have survived to hype up Pain like he did for Minato. More evidence that suggests this interpretation is true is how Fukasaku literally says that Sage Mode Naruto, who's also a Sanin and Kage level fighter, has surpassed his predecessors being Minato and Jiraiya. And yes, he actually said this. This is not me talking out of my ass. Now, like I said earlier, this is a very unpopular interpretation of how strong Minato is, but there is evidence that suggests that he is way overrated and closer to Jiraiya, Sage Mode Naruto, and Tsunade, the Raikage, Orochimaru. You know, there's evidence that suggests he's closer to those characters than what people like to admit. But let's go to the second interpretation, because that one also has some validity to it. The second interpretation implies that Minato, like Pain and Itachi, can body Sanin and Kage level ninja like nothing. But for this to be true, it must mean that Fukasaku was just being wrong about his statement about Naruto, as well as us misinterpreting Minato's battles with the Raikage, and the latter is possible. What if in those dozens of battles, Minato was fighting B and the Raikage straight up at the same time? And we don't know if this is true, because I mean, in the flashback, he's mostly fighting the Raikage with B interjecting in like one moment. But maybe if in, I don't know, there are other dozens of battles, Minato fought both of them straight up, sort of like how Momoshiki fought Naruto and Sasuke. Which, I mean, like, this is possible, and there is evidence that supports this. The evidence obviously being that Minato is just simply stronger than Orange Mask Obito, or at the very least likely stronger than Orange Mask Obito. And of course, this Obito is, in my opinion, weaker than Pain, but still very, very relative to Pain, or maybe even stronger. And of course, Pain and Obito are characters who could stalemate two Kage or Sanin level fighters at the same time. I mean, especially when you consider Shibaku Tensei or Chaotic Shira Tensei. So this interpretation will put Minato right at Pain's level, and maybe even slightly stronger or slightly weaker depending on how you interpret it. And just like the first interpretation, I think this one is pretty valid and has a decent amount of evidence. Now the third interpretation is just ridiculous. I mean, like, if we do a tier list and we have a sort of Kage and like Sanin tier, characters like Pain and Itachi would be like above that tier in like S tier. This interpretation would put Minato in like triple S or like double S. And like I said earlier, I think this is just ridiculous. But you'd be surprised, there's a lot of people who actually think this. There isn't much evidence for this. The most common used evidence for this type of interpretation is the idea that Obito would stomp Pain and Itachi, and since Minato's stronger than Obito, I mean, therefore Minato would beat them harder than even Obito would beat them. The issue with this argument is that there's not much evidence to put Obito above Pain. And yes, I know this is an unpopular opinion, but the data books, the manga, the statements, like, I mean, we should all at the very least be able to admit that Pain and Obito are relative to each other, if you don't want to admit that Pain is stronger. And of course, Minato isn't that far ahead of Obito either, because Obito actually does quite well versus Minato as a kid. Obito actually almost Kamui's Minato twice, and then again, this is him as a kid, let alone when he grows up and gets his orange mask. So this ridiculous interpretation of Minato just being in a different tier than Pain or Itachi just really doesn't work. And I don't know why it's just believed by so many people. Now, there are some YouTubers who love to bring up Minato's conversation with Naruto to try to cement this idea, but the way they paraphrase this conversation is just flat out lying. Like, I've heard people say that Minato said to Naruto, "This Pain guy is strong, but Obito's way stronger," and it's like, he never says this at all. And even if we do go with this ridiculous lie, it doesn't mean anything, because Minato doesn't even know how strong Pain is, because the Pain that he was watching fight Naruto was significantly handicapped. So even if you stretch this conversation to try to say that Minato thinks Obito's way stronger than Pain, it just doesn't work. So for this fight, I do think it's fair to take the second interpretation of Minato's strength. I think the first one has some validity, but I think that the second one also has a lot of validity, and it honestly makes for a better fight. So as for general ability and strength, Pain and Minato should be right there in the same ballpark. They're clearly superior to most Kage, clearly superior to the Sanin. They're so powerful that they can kind of take on two of them at the same time. You know, maybe not win, but at the very least stalemate them. And hell, if you want to say that one character is slightly stronger than the other, I mean, sure, have at it. I really don't think it impacts the result of this fight too heavily. And honestly, overall, I actually don't think that the interpretations of how strong Minato or Pain are really matter that much in this fight. So yes, I just spent 8 minutes going over this for no reason. But the reason I say this is because the advantages and the win conditions of each character do not change based upon who's stronger. So for example, like, even if you want to argue that Pain is like 60% stronger than Minato, it just doesn't change the fact that Minato's still faster than Pain, and his win condition will be flying Raijin into Rasengan or something like that. And even if you are one of the people who argue that Minato is astronomically stronger than Pain, it doesn't change the fact that Pain's AP is just way higher than Minato's, and a strong enough Shira Tensei could probably one-shot him. So the win conditions and the way that the fight goes doesn't really change based upon who's stronger. And I guess this is why I get pretty pissed off at the way people cover this fight, because they do it pretty disingenuously. I think who wins this fight really depends on how their abilities interact with each other, and you really need to dive pretty deep into well, how that would happen and how the fight would actually go. Instead of just saying, oh, this character scales above him or that character scales above them. I think that's a good starting point, but this fight goes so much deeper than that. So how would this fight actually go? So the first thing that we need to talk about is whether or not Pain can react to Minato. Now the short answer is yes, absolutely he can, but the long answer is no, he can't. And here's what I mean by this. Pain's reaction time heavily fluctuates based upon how many eyeballs are actually looking at the attack that's coming towards him. I think Jiraiya made this pretty evident when he occupied the vision of some of the Pains, and then they could really no longer react to them. He didn't even have to separate them literally, he just had to separate their focus. So to answer the question, can Pain react to Minato, we have to ask that question in sort of small fragments. Could Pain react to Minato if all 6 of the Pains are looking at the attack that Minato was launching? Yes, absolutely. And I say this because, Killer Bee reacts to Minato twice, and I think we can all agree with very little dissent that Pain's stats should be superior to Killer Bee's. On the other hand, could Pain react to Minato if it's only one Pain looking at the attack, or that Pain is separated? Absolutely not. The freaking Narakapath, I think it's the Narakapath, got hit by Konohamaru, so there's no way. Could Pain react to Minato if 5 or 4 Pains are looking at the attack? Maybe, but I think it's likely that Pain needs at least 3 or 4 to have, a clear vision as to what Minato is doing to actually react to the move. And even though he can react, doesn't mean he can do it consistently. So with that, I think we get a clear picture of the strategy of each character. I will say this, if Pain does not somehow slow down Minato's Flying Raijin, or affect the way Minato can use his Flying Raijin, he will lose this fight. But that's why this fight is so interesting. I think there's considerable amount of things that Pain can actually do. One of the things he could do is simply get rid of Minato's markers and not have to worry about reacting to so many potential threats. We've actually seen Pain kind of just blow up entire forests. If Minato throws his kunai into a bunch of trees like he did versus the Raikage, Pain's just gonna blow up the forest and also potentially break Minato's kunai and send them flying. So that would make it such that Minato would only have 20% of his kunais left, which would, in my opinion, greatly help Pain and take the pressure off of him. He doesn't even have to use Shinra Tensei, he could just use Universal Pole. Now they both should have the AP to put each other down, especially Pain with some of his attacks. Some of the highest AP in the series. Minato should be able to do it as well to majority of the Pains. I really don't think any of the Pains' durability is a humongous issue for Minato, aside from maybe the Diva path. But if this fight follows the direction that I think it will, I think they will reach a sort of stalemate type position where the angles and ways that Minato can attack Pain are quite limited, because obviously Pain can control his markers, or a large amount of his markers, and also it's quite risky to actually teleport into one of the Pains because their abilities are so crazy and very, very dangerous and just have such high AP that it's a pretty high risk. But on the other hand, Pain doesn't really have too many options to hit Minato either. To me, it seems like he has one strategy to actually hit Minato, and that is to use omnidirectional attacks that you can't really quote-unquote dodge. So for example, a large-scale Shinra Tensei, you can't really dodge it. To dodge it, you have to move away from the area of effect. And if Pain does it on a large enough scale, it's going to be pretty difficult to actually avoid it. Now, it doesn't mean he can't, I'm just saying that it's an option. Another option is Shibaku Tensei. I know a lot of people think that this is useless versus Minato because you can teleport away, but if the conditions are set and Minato is not near any of his safe houses that are away from the battle, so for example, if they're fighting in like the hidden, Pain wouldn't use Shibaku Tensei in a hidden rain village, but let's just say that he did. Like, all of the markers around the battlefield will get sucked up into Shibaku Tensei, so there's nowhere for Minato to even teleport to. And I think this will be an instant win for Pain. I don't see any way Minato can get out of this aside from teleportation. Now, whether or not he could teleport is up for debate. I could totally see Minato having had mark one of the Pains earlier in the battle and he saves it for this moment or something along those lines. But then again, this isn't anything concrete, but it is an option. So there are so many weird things that could happen in this fight, and so many ways that this fight could go. But based on everything that we've presented, I actually think I think it's more likely that Minato would actually win this fight, and here's why. I know people might be shocked to hear me say that, but I do think it is true. And the reason is that I think that even though Pain should be able to react to Minato if he limits the angles that Minato can attack with Flying Rajan, just because you can react to something doesn't mean that you can always react to it, and also doesn't mean that you can actually hit the other person. So I think it's sort of like, how can I illustrate? It's sort of like two boxers who are pretty evenly matched, but one boxer is like 3% better. In 12 rounds, sooner or later, that boxer that has slightly higher chance of hitting you, sooner or later will just hit you and win the fight. And I sort of think that's what would happen in this battle. Like I said, I do think that Pain does have a couple of options to hit Minato, but I do think that Minato's options to hit Pain are just slightly more consistent. And hell, like I said, if all 6 Pains are watching Minato, it's going to be hard for Minato to hit them, but continuous times over and over again, especially with continuous distractions, I think it's more likely that Minato will land a decisive hit before Pain does. Now, one of Pain's advantages is the fact that, he has numerous bodies, so even if you get one, there's still 5 others. That's something that nobody ever talks about in this fight. And you sort of lose the element of surprise as well. Now, I don't know, maybe Pain just uses a humongous Shinra Tensei that covers all of Minato's markers, so there's nowhere to run. And I don't know, maybe I might change my mind on this battle. This is so close in my head. Honestly, I might just leave it up to you guys, but in my opinion, I think it's 54% chance Minato wins and a 46% chance that Pain wins. I think this is extremely close. A lot of people just think it's a stomp, but no, I think this is extremely close. I do think that Pain has a bunch of options. I think that the fact that he has numerous bodies really takes away Minato's element of surprise. So he does some sort of kunai Flying Rajan to take out 2 of the Pains or 1 of the Pains. He's not doing that again. It's going to be very dangerous and very difficult to do that again. But yeah, that is my opinion on this fight. I think this is 12 out of 10 difficulty for both characters. But yeah, I think I've said enough. I'm sorry if you guys wanted this to be the end all be all to this debate, but even I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, I lean slightly towards Minato in this fight. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Anyway, please actually let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I would love to read all your comments on this fight. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Consider subscribing, liking the video, and then again, comment. And I'll see you guys in the next one.